Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Yesterday, my brother, who works at a local pizza place, came home with the wildest story. He works at one of those fancy pizza joints that offers a wide variety of uncommon toppings. The place prides itself on providing gourmet options, so you can get pretty creative with your orders. But nothing could have prepared him for the call he received that evening. So, he gets this call from a customer who sounds pretty determined. The guy says he wants a pizza with everything. My brother, thinking maybe the customer meant a deluxe pizza, tries to clarify. "Did you mean a deluxe pizza?" he asks. The customer, in a tone that brooked no argument, replies, "I want everything, you have it, I want it on mine." Now, my brother's been working there for a while, so he's heard his fair share of weird orders. But this was something else. He shrugged and decided to go for it. The customer wanted everything, so he'd get everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. He started with the basics: pepperoni, sausage, hamburger, and ham. Then he moved on to the more unique offerings. He added shredded roast beef and shredded turkey, piling it high. Next came the veggies: lettuce, tomato, banana peppers, and jalapeno peppers. The pizza was already looking pretty intense at this point, but he wasn't done yet. He sprinkled on the standard pizza cheese mix, then added cheddar and Swiss cheese for good measure. It was turning into a cheese lover's dream, or nightmare depending on how you look at it. But the real kicker, the coup de grace, he topped it off with pineapple, almonds, which they usually use for their Hawaiian pizza, and, of course, anchovies. It was, by far, the most loaded, most chaotic pizza he'd ever made. He couldn't help but laugh as he worked, imagining the look on the customer's face when they opened the box. But the laughter faded a bit when he tallied up the cost. With the place charging $2 per extra topping, the pizza came out to almost $50, including tax. It was the most expensive single pizza he'd ever made. And that wasn't the only thing that made this pizza memorable. It was so thick and messy that it would practically need to be eaten with a fork and maybe even scissors to cut through all that cheese. It was extra spicy, extra salty, and an absolute monstrosity in terms of toppings. When he finished, he boxed it up and handed it off to the delivery driver, wishing them luck with a chuckle. He couldn't help but wonder what the customer would think. Would they love it, hate it, call back to complain, or to praise the insane creation? Hours passed, and my brother kept waiting for that call. But it never came. No complaints, no praise, no nothing. It was like the customer just vanished into thin air, taking their ridiculous pizza with them. As he told me the story, we both laughed at the absurdity of it all. We tried to imagine what kind of person would order such a pizza. Maybe it was a dare, a prank, or maybe someone who really just wanted to try everything in one go. Whatever the reason, it made for one heck of a story. My brother's been working at that pizza place for a couple of years now, and he's had his fair share of weird orders. But this one takes the cake, or the pizza, I guess. It's stories like these that make his job interesting, even if they leave him shaking his head in disbelief. It's been a bit. Sorry for the radio silence. I had some people asking for updates, but things had been pretty quiet until this weekend, so I had nothing to post. I know people usually do a recap or something like that, so TLDR. My mother has always preferred my F29 stepbrother Chris, M42. He was my abuser growing up, and SAED me when from the time I was 11 to 16 when I moved with my half-brother after the worst attack. I recently was tracked down by my mother, and she along my stepbrother have been harassing me since. Currently I'm on a legal fight against them to recover some stolen inheritance from my father and trying to get an RO, among other matters. This weekend once again my mother decided to accost me at work. I was working from home doing clerical work for the clinic I work at. I'm a nurse practitioner, but took some clerical duties to be able to work from home when the mess with my mother and Chris began. Since then the time I could work from home has ended, so I am back in the clinic taking patients. For the most part, Saturday went well and quiet. Sunday, however, I noticed someone that shared my mother's name, but not her last name. My mom has a very unique name, very old-sounding, and I've seen it only twice in my whole life. Of course, there's a big Latino community where I live, so I just assumed this was another person. We're from a Colombian family, though I was born in the U.S. to an American father. Lo and behold, it was my mother using a fake last name. When I saw her, I immediately called my boss. She's aware of the situation and immediately went to ask my mother to please leave the premises. This can be a controversial move, so to explain it before the debate starts, she was in for a general checkup, not a life-or-death treatment. She was not denied because of protected reasons, but because I, as a member of staff, felt my life was in danger in her presence. There's a lot of other clinics in varying prices, and they are open to get new patients, so she can get her checkup anywhere else. This is allowed in our state's law. If she was hyperventilating or clearly in distress, we would not be able to ask her to leave. My mother, of course, went on a rampage, demanding to be seen by me specifically. My boss thankfully was not intimidated, and just insisted my mother had to leave, or else the cops would be called. After a back and forth that I was watching from the security cameras, this all happened in our waiting room. My mother threw a letter at my boss and left fuming. She even pushed a lady that was walking in, though thankfully no one was hurt. My boss brought me the letter and told me she will make sure to not assign me any patients with my mother's first name, and went to make arrangements with our front desk. I took a break and decided to read the letter, mostly to see if it was something I could use for my RO. This is a translation to my best capabilities. My lovely less than daughter greater than, it hurts me so much you refuse to speak to me. I love you so much, and all I want is to recover the years we've lost. I only have you left from your father, whom I love dearly. I know there's a lot of misunderstandings with Chris. He loves you so much too, and I wish you would give him a chance to prove it to you. He always talked about how beautiful you are, and how much he wished you two could spend more time together. He truly adores you, and I wish you would consider his feelings more. He even asked me to convince you to marry him, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Papa less than stepfather greater than and I are probably divorcing, and this will be the perfect solution, so Chris, you and I can stay a family. He keeps going on and on about how much he wants to raise you and his baby together. Let me know when you want to go shopping for wedding dresses. I love you, my darling mom. I'm gonna share a few personal notes here. I am unable to get pregnant. After Chris' attack, I had some medical complications that have left me unable to conceive. My mother knows about it. Chris knows about it. The cops know about it. They rule the whole thing as consensual sex, and because I was 16, the legal age of consent, nothing was done. I show this to my lawyer, and he added it to the compilation of things we're using for the RO. Still no court date, and the cops don't consider my case risky enough to do the paperwork for a temp order. I do have one officer who is taking this very seriously and has been amazing. It's just a majority who don't seem to care or have too much on their docket to give my case time. This happened in the early 2000s in my junior year of high school. The district had just built the third high school in our city, and most of the teachers were new. The band director was one of those new hires. He was qualified for the job, but had zero people skills, and was extremely abrasive towards students. He had previously taught university, and could not wrap his head around the fact that high school students are not college-level music majors, who live in practice rooms and write symphonies in their sleep. His normal behavior consisted of berating students for not knowing university-level curriculum, talking down to everyone about how he can't understand why they were so incompetent, and stopping rehearsals to go on long tangents about things that had nothing to do with music. Every day at least 2 to 3 students would leave class in tears. We complained to the higher-ups, and they repeatedly brushed us off. He made students hate attending his music classes, and many dropped band and orchestra as a result. One of the classes he taught was supposed to be Intro to Music Theory. For those who don't know music, This would be a class that should typically teach things like different types of chords, the definition of music symbols, the logic behind key changes, etc. At the first class of the year, there were about 25 kids enrolled. Most of these were music and drama kids who wanted to be teachers or performers in the arts one day. On the first day, he handed us a quiz because he wanted to see how much we knew. I think there were maybe 3 to 5 kids who were able to attempt a single question on the quiz. No one got a single answer right. That's how advanced it was. Imagine signing up for what you think is a basic pre-algebra class and walking into advanced calculus. This teacher spent the entire class period berating us for not being prepared when no one could even attempt his quiz. We told him, "This is an intro class. None of us have learned anything like this before." And his response was, "Really? I thought this was an advanced class." The next class period, there were maybe 15 kids enrolled. He did the same thing, asked us to perform something we can't even understand, and then berated us for not being prepared. At every class he would say, "I thought you all were musicians. This is supposed to be an advanced class." By the end of the second week, there were 6 students left enrolled in this class, including myself. He softened up slightly to those of us who stayed and seemed to think we were his prize students, and that this was his class of elites. Think Professor Slughorn from Harry Potter. In truth, we all thought he was insane and cruel, but the 6 of us had sufficient music background and experience to understand a fraction of his lessons. Without the bell curve, we all would have failed his class. A few months go by and we are at the end of the first semester. By now, every student connected to music in the school hated this guy, and repeated complaints had done nothing to fix the problem. The admins filed away every complaint, but never did anything more than remind him that he's supposed to be more kind to students. He changes nothing, and still berates students and makes them cry. So when it comes to the final exam for his theory class, he decides that he wants to give it to us early, so that on the day the final is supposed to be scheduled, we can have a class party instead. Of the 6 of us left, 4 of us have the same period after his class together as well. That class was AP English, and we were prepping for the AP test. We had no problem with a class party and music right before the AP prep exam, so we didn't complain. The day comes of our music final exam, and after we finish the test he tells us that for our class party, he wants to take us all to breakfast at a new IHOP that opened 20 minutes away. His class was first period. We try to tell him all the issues with this plan. We aren't allowed to leave campus without permission slips. It was a closed campus policy due to an incident where a student who left campus for lunch got hit by a car and was killed. We will not get back in time for second period, which is a final exam. He doesn't have permission to remove us from the campus. What if there is an emergency and we are unaccounted for, because we aren't even at the school? His solution was to tell us that after the start of class on our final class day, he would be going to IHOP, and if we wanted to join him, that was our choice, but if we didn't, we would have to stay in the classroom and not bring attention to the next that there was no class and no teacher, without talking about it to each other. The 6 of us saw an opportunity to finally get the admin's attention to the complete disregard this teacher had for rules and policies. We made sure to inform our English teacher that we might be late to class on the day of the final, due to a class field trip for music theory. She was irritated and reminded us that this final was very important and that she would not give us extra time if we came in late. We told her that we understood and gave her details about where we would be and what we would be doing and who we would be with. She said she still expected us to be in her class. On the day of the final, we all went to IHOP. It took forever to get there because of construction, and forever to get our food because the restaurant was newly opened and had a large number of customers. We got back to the school halfway through our second period class. The admins were waiting for us. Security was waiting for us. My English teacher had called the front office to complain that 4 of her best students were missing and that she was fairly certain we weren't even on campus. The admins had checked attendance and seen that we were all marked present that morning, and they had searched the entire school looking for our class. The four of us walked into our English final to a livid teacher. We knew she was pissed at us, but couldn't punish us beyond saying we had the same remaining time as the rest of the class, since we had been with a teacher in our absence. None of us did as well in the final as we could have, if we had the full 87 minutes, but we were doing well enough in the class already that the lesser marks didn't affect our overall grade too much. The band teacher had a private reprimand that was so loud the entire school could hear it. He was confused as to why the administration was upset that he took minor children off campus without permission or notice, without proper school transportation, or even a good reason. He stayed with his usual attitude, but this time towards the admins. "Why are you guys so incompetent about this? They are old enough to drive. What's the problem?" The English teacher, who I actually adore, and was one of the best teachers I've ever had, absolutely went mama bear on the administration about how they could continue to employ someone who disrespects the other teachers so much as to deprive his students of their final exams and put them in potentially dangerous circumstances. He told us to drive ourselves to the restaurant, and any accidents or medical issues would have been the school's fault. He was fired later that day. Many of the students had a gleeful but confused reaction, since the six of us weren't talking to anyone about it. All most people knew was that this tyrant of a teacher was gone. We didn't spread the story very much of how it happened because we still feared being reprimanded for our involvement, since he technically have us a choice to go with him or stay, but I always smiled when people gossiped about what the final straw was that got him fired. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. 3 years ago, I, a 24-year-old woman, moved in with my friend, we'll call her Karen. A 23-year-old woman. We had been friends for about a year but had known each other and been acquaintances for roughly 10 years. This friend was known to be a little bipolar, but she respected me and knew I had way clearer boundaries than her other friends. We moved in with my now fiancé, a 26-year-old man, into a 2-bedroom apartment. We were paying 2/3 of the rent while Karen paid 1/3. The first issue arose when she asked if she could move her dog in, and I said no problem. I was working as an assistant manager, putting in anywhere from 40 to 55 hours a week, and would come home to dog pee and poop everywhere. I mean everywhere. Think floors, couch, and walls. He chewed everything, got into the garbage, the whole bit. I would let him out, clean up the mess, and then inform Karen that she needed to take better care of her dog. She demanded that her job, which she typically worked for 6 hours a day, was too much for her, and that it was my job to take care of her dog. Meanwhile, she constantly called off work or showed up hours late. At one point, I refused to clean it, so at most, she would pick up poop but wouldn't scrub anything. I witnessed one of her friends sleep with her face next to an unscrubbed dog poop stain on the couch, and almost vomited. The second big issue arose when the second month's rent was due. I texted Karen that my fiancé, we'll call him Bear, and I had our rent ready and asked if we could get together to write a check to the renters. She told me the banks were closed, and she didn't have the money, as if the banks not being open made up for her poor planning. So we had to rearrange our finances to cover her third of the rent. I texted her that we covered it for her, and that she owed us 1/3 of the rent. She replied after a few hours that her mother paid it, so her rent for the next month would be covered. I replied that would mean that my fiancé and I were 1/3 ahead, and she would still owe the next month. As we were the ones who paid extra, she argued and was adamant that we were wrong and that she was not going to pay. Another issue was food. In the first month that we lived there, we spent $600 on food to fill the house and pantry while Karen shopped with me and bought equal amounts of food. I budget very well with food, and one way I do that is by buying store brand products. Karen kept snapping that she didn't like store brands and that I was annoying her. I told her that what I buy for myself was none of her business, as we were both buying our own groceries. I caught her sending her boyfriend to work with my food. We're talking a whole 12-pack of stuff, and I got irritated. The food waste really ticked me off when one time I had friends over for a party, and came out the next day to find my food all thrown out or just shoved out of the fridge but still in containers. Karen's excuse was there was no room for her food in the fridge, so she emptied it completely. After 3 weeks, I ran out of $600 worth of food and had to yet again rearrange my budget to allow for more groceries. After this, petty and lazy stuff happened all the time. I tried to wash my clothes in our shared washer and came to find my wet clothes soaking across the basement floor. We found a week-old rotisserie chicken in the microwave with maggots in it. There was so much more, but honestly, it's not all worth my energy typing. After my clothes were found strewn across the floor, I came up really heated and said that my stuff better start getting respected, at which point Karen's boyfriend tried to step up to me, and my fiancé told him to watch himself. Karen turned around and refused to look at me or talk while her boyfriend yelled that I needed to step up and clean up after Karen more, because she was tired from work, as if I wasn't working way more than her. At this point, I agreed to sign her boyfriend's name, we'll call him Puppy Dog, onto the lease. I did this because it made it easier to sign my name off of the lease. So I informed Karen that I would be leaving as soon as possible. I came home from work to find my furniture on the front porch. I moved it back in and told Karen that she better not touch my stuff again before I move out. At this point, she informed me that she paid rent early so I could leave since I didn't pay my share for that month, as if it worked that way. The very next day, I got a screen recording sent to me of a 15-minute Snapchat video of Karen's boyfriend Puppy Dog going on a rant fueled by drugs, saying he was going to kick my butt for basically standing up for myself against his girlfriend, and that my fiancé was a big teddy bear. So if he tried to get in the way, he would knock him out too. Then he went on a rant saying the house being a mess was my fault, and that the dog mess was also my responsibility. The whole video was a mess, and you could tell he was on drugs, but it was enough to make us decide that we were just done. So I called my dad and asked for help moving furniture. We showed up to our apartment to find Puppy Dog sitting there with a handgun on the coffee table in front of him, and Bear exploded. He grabbed hold of Puppy Dog and told him to call him a teddy bear to his face. Puppy Dog tried to gouge his eyes out, and that's when my fiancé went all out on this man. He was a wrestler in high school, and I've never seen someone get beaten up with only 2 punches thrown. At one point, he smashed his ribs between his arms and the ground, and I truly believe he broke them. I called the police so that we could give our statements, and so that the police could watch while we took the rest of our belongings. I wanted our statements taken so that my roommate couldn't manipulate the situation. No charges were filed for either party. Karen has made posts saying it's on site as soon as she sees me, but I have blocked her on all social media and went so far as to delete mutual friends that I had no interest in forcing to take sides. She has stalked multiple social media platforms and has had friends comment on statuses threatening me. Here's the kicker. I thought she had been done obsessing over me for roughly 2 years now. I moved out, became a mom, and am excited to say we are pregnant again with our second child. Recently, her fiancé keeps coming up in the People You May Know tab on my socials, and I got a notification saying that I may know him too. I felt like she was trying to stalk me again, so I blocked him too. Well, lo and behold, a friend came up to me and said that Karen was bragging that she found out the gender of my baby. I don't know, I just thought that this was such weird behavior, and fit well in this thread. I feel like I will forever have a fan because no matter how hard I try to block her, I find out that she's studying my life again. Too bad you can't block a person in real life. I've just cut off my 66-year-old mother. I am so racked with guilt and shell shock from our falling out this past Saturday that I can barely write much about it. She is on disability, so she only has around $1,300 a month to live on, has no part-time job, no car, and lives in a somewhat rural area. Since 2017, I, a 29-year-old woman, have been financially supporting her. My sister has a very strained relationship with her but has her own family to take care of, so she does not contribute financially like I do. I've bought my mother 2 vehicles, the most recent of which I purchased in January, and she destroyed it already. She smokes marijuana and drinks, and she used to be addicted to pain pills. She is a very typical narcissist. Without me, she is quite literally up a creek without a paddle, and I don't know how to cope with the guilt. For reference, my father passed away in 2017. They were divorced but still friends and helped one another. Here are some of the things I've done for her. In 2018, I bought her a car and paid for most of its maintenance, doing many of the repairs myself. I gave her money literally anytime she asked. I allowed her to be an authorized user on my credit card, which she promptly racked up $500 on for her numerous cats. She never paid me back or contributed to the payments and screamed at me when I expressed my feelings about it, ruining my 26th birthday. She got herself kicked out of her apartment by picking a fight with the new landlord. I bought her a fifth-wheel camper and had someone park it so she had a place to live. She refused to give up her many cats, which then wound up destroying the camper. I moved the camper to different sites, did all the maintenance, and still gave her money. Somehow, she has gone through 5 different televisions and broken all of them. I bought her a new one every single time. I bought her a new phone outright because she wouldn't stop complaining about the one she had. She insisted she wanted to buy a house with the zero money she had. Somehow, she managed to find a house for $60,000, and I used the last of my savings to secure the house, paying for and doing all the appraisal repairs myself. I moved her out of the camper by myself in one day during a snowstorm with all of her cats. I have done numerous repairs to the house, yard work, and given her more money. I repaired her car again, then she somehow blew 2 tires and drove it home on the rims. I had to scrap the car. In January, I bought her another vehicle and paid for her insurance. She failed to check the oil, put air in her tires, drove it without oil, and ruined the motor. This resulted in a $3,000 loss for me by May of this year. I have been driving her everywhere since she destroyed the car, buying her groceries, cat food, beer, heating fuel oil, you name it. She then decided she wanted to sell the house and move in with me to save money. I agreed but told her she couldn't bring all her animals. She agreed to let go of all but 7 cats, which she wanted to house full-time outdoors in catios. I started looking to buy a shed I could convert for proper shelter. She laid it on me last week that she had to shut off the utilities on the 7th because she was so far behind on bills. I work full-time and panicked, wondering how I was going to have time to move her out, prepare the selling documents, repair the house, and get it on the market. Cut to Saturday. We are at a family get-together for my nephew, an hour away from her house. She starts drinking and smoking and will not stop talking about my past abusive marriage, for which I have severe post-traumatic stress disorder. She holds the 5 years I was out of state against me for some reason because I was terrified to tell anyone about my abusive husband, for fear of my life. She victim blames me. I tell her to stop talking about it, but she keeps going. I tell her that's her last drink, as I'm cutting her off since I'm driving her an hour back home. I say if she's using me for rides and eventually for a home, she needs to respect me and my wishes. Literally my house, my rules. She goes, I don't have to listen to you. And you're right, you're driving me home. Not a single ounce of gratitude. Then she says, no one ever asked you to do any of this anyway. You didn't have to be your father when he died. I go full nuclear on her. All the rage, stress, and feeling unappreciated come out. I remind her she'd be homeless without me at this point. She delusionally believes she can handle everything without me, and shuts up halfway through the hour ride home. Take me back to my house. I won't ever listen to your rules or live under your roof. I drop her off. She does her dramatic goodbye, and goes into her house. I haven't heard from her since, nor do I want to. She has no car, basically no money, and too many animals that she can barely take care of. The guilt of cutting her off has me messed up so badly I feel like I'm going to cry or lose my sanity at any moment. Am I in the wrong to leave her dead in the water? She can't do a thing for herself without my help, and she knows it but won't admit she needs my help or even acknowledge how much I've taken care of her. Please help me. This situation has me completely immobilized. She'll likely wind up foreclosing on the house, and I have no idea what she'll do. I am racked with worry, and I don't know if I can live with myself with this decision. I have my own house, mortgage, and bills to take care of, and I'm in the process of finding a new job that pays more to compensate for my non-existent savings. I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown at work. I need some serious insight. This story starts about 7 or so years ago, but you'll need some background info first. After I graduated high school, I wasn't able to afford college, so I became a CNA at a nursing home. It was a bad job, literally. I worked there for about 8 months before I left to work for a healthcare agency where I could make my own schedule and also work home care cases. Most of my patients were only allowed a home health aide temporarily while they recovered from surgery or an illness, or sometimes their insurance would only cover a few hours a day when they really needed much more. After several months, my agency called me about a patient that was disabled and approved for 9 hours a day every day. She was considered a permanent case, as someone from the state would come twice a year to evaluate and authorized continuation of home services. I ended up working with this lady, Jerry, for about 2 years with the agency. She was a sweet woman, and although there was a generation gap, we got along great. She had a sister, Nancy, who was a self-proclaimed advocate for her sister and her very handicapped daughter, Jessica. I always admired her because she was dealt a bad card with having to care for not only her sister but a daughter who was unable to care for herself. We lived in New York State, and they had recently come out with this CDPAP program that would allow the family to appoint people as caregivers. They would then choose a healthcare agency to process the paychecks. It was nice because it allowed families to have more control over the care they received, and more importantly, you could get paid for taking care of your own family members. But there were limitations, one of which was that you couldn't get paid to work with your child. It had to be a sibling or some other kind of relationship. Nancy really liked me, and when she asked if I'd be willing to work with Jerry and Jessica under this program, I said heck yes. At the time, Jerry and Jessica lived in different places, but the family was able to get them Section 8 vouchers and move them to the same apartment building, so the aides could do split shifts. With the amount of hours between the two of them, I was easily working a minimum of 40 hours a week. Then things changed. Nancy realized that she could get paid for literally doing nothing. The program is flawed in that the patient is approved for a certain amount of hours, and all you do is fill in the sheets weekly, print a schedule of when people are supposed to work, and return them to the agency that processes the paychecks. There's no way to prove that someone is actually there taking care of the person. At first, Nancy started filling out timesheets for herself whenever there were hours left over for the week. Hours that no one worked. She could only claim these hours for Jerry, so she would fill out a timesheet for her son, saying that he worked with Jessica whenever she had leftover hours. Now, her son did actually help out from time to time, but not for all the hours she was claiming. Eventually, Nancy got greedy and started deliberately stealing hours from me and the other aides. It got so bad that she pushed us out by not scheduling us. I was struggling financially at the time, so this was devastating to me. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college, and here I was working hard, so I could take a few community college classes and pay my bills. There had been some Medicaid cuts, so it wasn't like I could just find another patient. I was still technically employed at my old agency, and none of their offices had work because there just wasn't enough. Now onto the revenge. The second I realized what Nancy was doing, I started taking pictures of the weekly schedules and everyone's timesheets. Then once I stopped working there, I called up the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit and reported her. I explained the entire story, and for a while, I didn't hear anything. Then I heard back from an investigator, and I gave him all the details he wanted. I had copies of schedules and timesheets to show that Nancy was pretending to schedule aides, but ultimately putting herself and her son on the timesheets. I also had another aide as a witness to back up all my claims. More months passed, and then I got a call saying that the CDPAP program was a gray area for them. and there wasn't much they could do because it's hard to prove cases like this. So I just let it go and forgot all about it. Then, almost 2 years ago, I got a call from the Attorney General's office, and it turns out the case was sent to another investigator and reopened. They wanted to meet with me and go over some evidence. It was over 3 years after I made the complaint, so many of the smaller details had been lost. Turns out they had been spending the last few years building a case against the family, and they were nearly ready to go to court. And man, did they have a lot of evidence. Apparently Nancy had forged my signature on timesheets to put hours that I had worked with Jerry under Jessica, so she could claim all the hours for Jerry. Then, she was filling out timesheets for her son who wasn't working because he was away at college in a different state. She was just pocketing all the money for herself. I ended up moving across the country shortly after, so I had completely forgotten about this. Then, last week, I randomly Googled Nancy's name and had a mini freakout when I read the news articles. Turns out that Nancy and her son were arrested a year ago and charged with a few felonies each. Nancy must have taken a deal because she pleaded guilty earlier this year to one of the felonies and was ordered to pay back over $100,000 that she stole from the state. She also got 5 years probation. Not only that, but it made the local news, and it's the first thing that comes up when you Google her name, which I've changed for the purpose of this story. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.